Welcome to the RC Aerobatics podcast. This episode, we speak with Bryan Hebert of Hebert Competition Designs and CKAero. We talk about his history, how he developed his knowledge, his skill, and his knowledge of trimming and designing, and his passion for the sport. How he met Brett Wickizer and developed their partnership and some of the things they are doing now. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for coming on the show, Bryan.
Yeah, you're welcome. I appreciate it.
Look, some people here may not know exactly too much about you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your background and where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in South Louisiana, Houma, a little town called Houma, Louisiana. Graduated in around '82 from a Christian school there, and went on the wild goose chase of finding what I wanted to do in life. I guess didn't go to college. Went to the School of Hard Knocks.
I hear you. I hear you. And when you got out of school, what did you go into? What kind of work did you go into?
Well, started out working in the oil field. First, my dad was a commercial shrimper and had his own shrimp boat, and did a deckhand work with him for many years, and then did a little bit of everything. Bounced around from the oil field to retail sales, and traveled the country doing managing retail stores for almost 10 years. And wound up in Baton Rouge, and I haven't left here. I guess I moved here around '87.
Okay, very good, very good. And I know you probably didn't start right out designing airplanes. How did you get into RC and migrate up to designing airplanes?
Well, I as far back as I can remember, I've had a love for airplanes, and kind of a creative type. I just like making things and doing things, and I guess I had a few uncles that flew control line airplanes, and I had one uncle that was also creative, and he always had something going on, building something for the hobby, control line planes and stuff. And then I had the good fortune to move. Mom, and dad bought a house, and we moved next door to a guy who was an RC guy. Not a very good one. He crashed everything. Him and my dad crashed everything. I woke up to the beautiful sound of a McCoy 35 in the back of my house and crashed into a tree. But that's kind of how it got started. He kind of stoked that passion of model airplanes, and when he crashed something, I would take it out of the garbage, and Mom and Dad would go buy me some glue, and I'd rebuild it, or I'd make something else out of it. And that's kind of where it all started, really.
Okay.
Every Christmas, my wish list was 10 or 12 Comet kits and a bunch of Ambroid, and I was content with that. I'd build those things all through the wintertime and then crash them in the summertime.
Oh, goodness. Well, as you were building and everything, when did you start building and fixing for other people?
I don't know. It kind of years. I guess I really just built for myself until I moved to Baton Rouge, and I was a pretty good craftsman, but I didn't realize I had any talent at it. I never, because of my retail jobs, I never really joined a club, because on the weekends I was working every weekend, and during the week there was nobody there. So I would find a place to fly on the side of the road or in the field somewheres. And I moved to Baton Rouge because the pattern activity. I always wanted to do pattern. I thought the airplanes in the magazines were so beautiful, and at the time, the pattern airplanes were kind of where jets are today. It's kind of the pinnacle of the sport, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I moved to Baton Rouge, I showed up at I asked them where the local. I knew about the Dixie RC Club here, and I asked them the hobby shop how to get here, and he showed me how to get here, and I had designed a pattern airplane from pictures that I saw in the magazines. Basically, I drew up an airplane and built it, and I couldn't wait to come out and show somebody. And
Wow, no doubt.
at that time, the Dixie RC Club had about 20 pattern pilots in the club. It was really a hotbed for pattern. So, really, I guess a top flyer that day, Paul Berger, was a member of the club, and a couple of good builders were out there. And I just showed up at the club one day and unannounced and pulled a couple of airplanes out, and they didn't know who I was from Adam, and they were stunned. They asked me where I got the plane and who built it, and when I told them I designed it and built it, they pretty much called me a liar. He said, "We know everybody who can build that well and who monocoats and finishes that well, and we don't believe you." And eventually, I convinced them that I did indeed design and build the airplane and monocoat the airplane. And I left that day with 4 monocoat jobs. And that's kind of how it started. I started in an area where people were needing professional skills to build high quality airplanes. And I started building for Paul. Paul was trying out for the U.S. team, and he never succeeded, but he was at that time a top 15 pilot amongst about 100 competitive FAI pilots.
Mm-hmm.
So he put my name out there, and the fact that he was flying the work that I built for him and monocoated for him kind of got me a little bit of publicity. And then one thing led to another, and to be able to afford the hobby. And back then, I had a young child, and my wife was in college. There was no way I could afford a real pattern airplane. So I said the only way I can get it is to make it myself. And that's kind of where it started. I started doing work for people on the side to be able to afford to buy the YS61 short stroke and the pipes and the radios. And I had, I jumped into the hotbed of pattern, but I didn't fly it and I didn't have any equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So it enabled me to enjoy the hobby right off the bat with, working on the side, doing monocoat building work.
Right, right. Very interesting. And
Uh,
go ahead. Sorry.
so, no, it's okay. Later on, once I got some exposure to what the requirements actually are, what it should weigh, the size, the props people were using, the airplanes. At that time, Henry Pjorn had the Eclipse had just came out, and I just thought that thing was so far advanced above everybody's airplane. It was just a beautiful. It looked like an airplane you could fly. It didn't look like a scaled down jet like most of the pattern planes of that era. It didn't look like a Bridie Escape, which I thought was hideous. As an artist and a designer, none of that stuff moved me. But when Henry Pjorn came out with his airplane, and Ron Gigi came out with the first Typhoon, it really inspired me as a launching pad to become a better designer and to and and build more airplane looking, sport plane looking pattern planes. And that's right after turnaround. This is around 88.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane design direction was kind of taking a new trend because 4-strokes were just coming out. Turnaround had just started happening a few years earlier, and so it was a big creative time for all the designers in that time period. So I just kind of got in at the right moment, and because I'm somewhat of an artist, I would draw my own prints and cut my own foam and build everything. We built everything from scratch. The wings, the stads, everything was hand drawn and built from scratch. And I had enough work with just the 20 members in our club. It kept me busy, and I was able make some decent money, building airplanes, doing something I loved on the side when I wasn't working my full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was
that's
it?
kind of where it really started.
Oh, okay. Okay. Was it back then? I know you do a lot with trimming and trimming guides now and making sure people's planes are straight. Was it back then that you realized that how important that was?
Yeah, when you're designing an airplane, especially for the first time, you really have no clue what you're doing. Everything goes on, that looks about right, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, I wasn't a very good pilot. I was a sport pilot, but to fly pattern competitively, you needed to be able to separate your your inefficiencies or your poor skills as a flyer from the poor setup of the airplane. And back then, you didn't just call nobody and buy an airplane built. You did it all yourself. And so if you were a poor builder, you had a double whammy of being a bad flyer, and then you had to fly around a bad airplane. And so I consumed everything I could find on trimming airplanes, and Don Lowe and Dean Pappas. Dean Pappas was my hero. I read everything he wrote. He had such an enthusiasm for the hobby and the sport. Very knowledgeable guy. Had been to the TOC. I think he might have came close to making the U.S. team, or he might have been on the U.S. team back, before my time in flying. But I could tell Dean knew what he was talking about. So anything they wrote on trimming airplanes or setting an airplane up correctly, design, I read it and I tried to implement what they suggested. And through the years, what happens is somebody like Dean writes something and it kind of becomes gospel in the sport, but it wasn't necessarily fact. It wasn't necessarily true. So eventually, you have to come to the conclusion that the information may not be correct. And there's a bunch of, I don't want to call them fairy tales, but bad information on airplane trimming and setup that it took me a long time to weed through because I was a believer in it. And I was really good at measuring airplanes and setting airplanes up and understanding the characteristics of the airplane. I was able to sort all the bad information out and come up with basically my own Bible for setup and trimming.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a little bit of time because unfortunately I wasn't a very good pilot, and you have to overcome your piloting skills. For yourself, when you get a brand new airplane, and it takes you some time to get used to that airplane as a pattern plane or an IMAC plane, because you're feeling out why is the airplane doing these things? I didn't tell them to do that, but it's got a mind of its own. And when you don't have a lot of skill, uh, it takes you a while to separate that to figure out where the problem lies. And I think the best thing that ever happened to me was I got lucky and I designed an airplane that flew as perfect as I think it's probably possible to make an airplane fly at this time. This is around 1998. And this allowed me to try different things on setup and trimming and adjusting to see where the airplane made a deviation or a correction, whether it improved or it got worse. And I was able to separate characteristics of the airplane design versus the setup that I induced into the design to tell whether or not it was good or bad. And I could always go back to the base setup and it would fly perfectly again. So I had a good foundation to work from.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me the understanding that it is possible to have a perfect airplane. And then from that point on, I just came up with a solution on how to reproduce that airplane, basically. And also, when you have an airplane that flies that well, you're able to make improvements to the design. When you can exploit an airplane to where you can't improve it anymore, it's time to move on to something else. You take all those ideas you've put in that bucket for the last 2 years and you come out with a new design. Now you have new engines, new props, new theories, and you come up with a conclusion. You kind of distill that down into what you want to do, and you make your next design. And the trimming never changes. The designs change, and the requirements for the designs change, the patterns and all that stuff changes, but the trimming is constant, whether it's a beginner airplane or an FAI airplane. And what I've kind of devoted my last 20 years, really 20 years, is boiling that down into an effort where I can share that with uh, a pilot that has basic skills all the way up to an F-3A team member. And each, it's just like playing an instrument. When you take lessons, the teacher's going to give you a guitar, and you're going to go home and play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star when you really want to play Stairway to Heaven, you know.
Right.
And that you basically, you have to set a foundation to improve your flying, and if you can get the airplane set up properly, it makes your ability to fly the airplane so much easier. So that's kind of that, because I went through that as a designer, believing a bunch of so-called facts that weren't really true. It hindered my ability to excel because I wasted a lot of time believing people that told me things that didn't wound up not being factual. So I want to, there's a lot of charts and manuals and trim guides that are very short and sweet. And, if the airplane rolls while you're pulling the loop, add wingtip weight. There's a lot of basic stuff. But really, all those things are band-aids. The real flaws of the problem are more complicated. And one flaw can cause 4 problems. So, I've spent a long time designing airplanes and then taking the skill set that I have for trimming an airplane and trying to write that down to share the information. And that's kind of where the trim guide came from.
Gotcha.
And now I'm to the point where it's hard to add anything to it because it gets really deep in the minutia of trimming, and people at that point don't really want to read that stuff. They just, I'm continuing to move forward to find absolute minutia on a design, and people just want to be able to do a 4-point roll.
Right.
You can't, unless somebody's willing. You have to have a certain personality too, but unless somebody's willing to just go for all-out perfection, um, there's really no use in it going any further than what I've taken it now. But I think the information is really good because there are 2 or 3 guys that will take that, and I'll get an email once in a while. Hey, you said on question 4 on this subparagraph here, you put a note here, but when I looked at it, it doesn't make any sense. And I'll go back and look at it. Hey, he's right. Okay, somebody's reading these things because they found a small problem here that I didn't catch when I wrote all this stuff down, and it's been accumulating for many years. So I know there's guys out there still really studying it and trying to put it to use. And my whole effort is making it easy to understand. And that's kind of where the guide comes from. It's basically a trimming flow chart. And if you really want to know how to make your airplane fly good, all the information is in that trimming guide.
Yeah, I find it kind of amazing sometimes. You'll say, man, this plane is flying really, really good. And then I'll watch you go change something. It's like, then why are you changing something?
Yeah. I want to know. I want to know why. Because you can have a conclusion, and a lot of times I'll try to knock out 2 birds with 1 stone. And if you take away a small addition or adjustment that you made, a whole group of new problems arise, or not problems, but challenges will arise. And to be able to trim and understand people from around the world describe the way their airplanes fly differently. Everybody's kind of looking for something that they can make work with their skill set, with their abilities. Uh, some people are concerned whether an airplane tucks to the belly on a roll. Some people are not. They fly around it. Some people correct things and don't even realize they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so I need to be able to understand every little bitty detail to share it with the modeler, because every flaw has 2 or 3 other flaws attached to it. Sometimes we fly around the other 2, we're not concerned with them, but they're also part of the big flaw you're trying to fix. So if I can figure out all the flaws that are involved in your problem, is always usually just one solution, and it'll fix all these flaws. Some of the flaws you don't even realize you have.
Yeah.
So that's why, I go through kicks, because I kind of preach that my airplanes fly the best. They're the purest. You can fly them with no mixing. And when you claim stuff like that, your airplanes have to be able to do it. And if it doesn't, I have to be able to explain to the customer why.
Right.
So that's kind of, my new kick is thrust, the the flaws and the benefits of adding and removing and subtracting thrust, and what thrust does, coupled with wing incidence or CG or all these things, because you have 4 or 5 settings on the airplane that are critical to how it flies. The airplane has to fly on knife edge, wings loaded, in a vertical, wings unloaded, loaded upside down, flying an inverted pass. So, you'll have somebody say, well, you need, 2 degrees of right thrust. Well, what happens when you fly it upside down and the wings are loaded totally opposite? Now your rotor trim's changed. So you have to be able to explain to the customer or to the person trying to use your methods all the details on what he's trying to accomplish, good or bad.
Right.
So
Right.
sometimes
Along
I'm
those
extremely
lines.
happy,
Uh-huh.
but I still want to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Along those lines with thrust, how does the evolution of glow to electric now to contra affect all that thrust and that study of the thrust?
In all of my testing, the Allura airplane was kind of a proof of concept that none of us need thrust, from single blade glow to single blade electric to contrast.
Hmm.
Thrust is a band aid, and most of the problems that cause us to use thrust comes from the back of the airplane, either twisted or warped stabs, stabilizers that are not set correctly, elevator halves that are not correctly set, because the elevators actually steer the airplane.
Hmm.
Crooked stabilizers, just one tenth of a warp on a stabilizer is like 15 clicks of fine elevator trim. So if you have a warp that induces you to trim the airplane with 15 clicks of trim and you're upright, as soon as you unload the wings to knife edge or you pull in a vertical, now that dynamic changes, and that trim you installed to make the airplane fly correctly upright now shows itself in a steering moment in the back of the airplane. Well, what the average modeler does, it's very hard to read 1/10 of warp in a stabilizer. They just go to the front of the airplane and they put thrust in it, and it seems to fix the problem. And for years, that's what we did. Everybody did it. I did it. Uh, I stopped doing it back in by '99, when I designed the Patriot. That airplane had no thrust, and it didn't need it, and I didn't even know
Hmm.
why. It's just something that I kind of stumbled across, because I believed, like everybody else did, you had gyroscopic effect and P factor and all this stuff influencing, the airplane. But I never could tell the difference of when I was full throttle or gliding the airplane. The track of the airplane didn't change. I didn't feel the airplane yank off to the side when I pulled the throttle down. So, just kind of common sense curiosity made me explore those things.
Hmm.
And when the Allura won the Nationals, it was first, second, and third with single prop electric, single prop glow, and contra, all using the same thrust set up by me. So it kind of made me pursue that even further as to why people wanted to use it more or less. And all of my airplanes today pretty much come, you can put any setup you want in it and fly it straight from the factory. And it makes it easier to design an airplane and manufacture an airplane when you don't have to have 3 different versions of it. It comes out of the same mold, you stick a motor in it and go fly. But in general, if your airplane needs thrust, you have a problem in your stabilizer, or your wings are not square in the airplane. The stabilizers are warped. They're not symmetrically set up side to side. You have one that set it at 0 and the other one set it at 10th positive, or something like that, and that's where it comes from. Mm-hmm. But generally, the average modeler is not going to he's not going to take a meter out and get down to brass tacks with it and find out why he needs thrust. He's just going to go and add thrust. And it's a Band-Aid that allows you to fly precision, and it does work. Small thrust adjustments is fine. At some point, when Brett and I are trimming an airplane for a team trials or world championships, Brett will say, okay, that's enough. I'm going to fly it like it is. He kind of says, this is how far we're going to go with the trimming process. Now I'm going to learn to fly it like that and fly it. I'm not like that because I'm so curious. I want it perfect. Mm-hmm. So I don't practice. I'm constantly trimming airplanes. And it's not good if you're trying to fly F3A and be competitive. But, I've kind of come to the conclusion that, I'm more suited to designing and finding problems with an airplane than being competitive on the circuit. And that's what I enjoy doing. So I just kind of, well, you see me at the flying field and I'm out there, I might make 8 or 9 thrust changes while I'm out there with, very small shims and just to see the effect of if I add thrust, if I add incidence, if I add CG, if I'm adding power, what does it do in a vertical? How does it, what's the difference if I'm flying a knife edge and I have down thrust versus no down thrust? And it just allows me to improve my designs.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. Over the years, I know sometimes the designing is kind of an evolution, and I know some of your planes have evolved, but how many airplanes do you think you've designed since you started?
I've kind of lost count. Airplanes that I've either drew plans or kitted, it's getting close to 20 now, probably around 20. Uh-huh. And of those 20, there were versions and variations with different wings and stabs. At one time when I was building the Patriots, I had 3 or 4 different wings that went on the same fuselage. And it was mostly to solve my curiosity. I've had airplanes where I've had 6 sets of stabs on it. And, I'll say this, that we put a lot of emphasis as designers and enthusiasts for F3A on airfoils and wing size and airfoil thickness and all that stuff. We haven't scratched the surface of perfection yet to get in the weeds of whether or not we have the right airfoil, because it is so far down on the scale of priority that it really, you have to pursue the airplane in other areas before you can improve stuff that we really don't understand. And as modelers, we love to put complicated solutions to problems that are basically poor building skills. Yeah. And some of the hardest things that I have to deal with designing and putting airplanes out is putting something in the modeler's hands that he can't screw up, or the factory can't screw up when they make it. It's really the hardest part. I can put an airplane on a bench and in 10 minutes tell you whether or not it's crooked, what needs to be done to fix it, and I can tell you what the airplane is doing while you're flying it if you're good enough to detect it. Or you can come to me and tell me, my airplane does this and this. When I pull up, it goes off to the left. And when I do a knife edge, it does this. I can tell you what's wrong with it. And then I'll measure it and show it to you. But the average guy he's not interested in that. He doesn't have time. And so my job as a designer is not only to make an airplane, design the airplane, but is to help the factory produce airplanes that a modeler can easily assemble and it's straight. And I'll tell you, that's probably the hardest part of the whole effort is taking a bunch of Asian housewives and making thoroughbred F3A airplanes. And it's really amazing that we do it as well as we do, and that they do it as well as they do, because it's hard. The average modeler with 30 years of experience cannot build to the quality of what we can buy today. So they've lost all of their setup skills, their trimming skills. They just want to pull it out of the box like they just got back from Walmart, stick a motor in it, and the advent of electric airplanes has made it even better. And I think it's kind of saved pattern. People don't have time to spend 6 months building an airplane and polishing out a finish anymore. They want that? Nobody wants to do that when you can spend, about $3,000 on a top airplane that you could never produce yourself. It's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So the problems change. Now we're going from being able to design an airplane and build an airplane that you can actually fly and compete with, to buying an airplane that you understand how to set up perfectly and compete. So my workarounds of some of these solutions is I offer that service. When I get the airplane, I pull it out of the box, I check it for accuracy, and I set it up perfectly. And you've had a couple of my airplanes. When you take off, there's nothing to do to them. I've trimmed them on the bench. It's no accident. I know how to read them perfectly because I designed the airplane. I know how it's intended to be done, and that right there is worth more than the value of the airplane, because a lot of people spend the whole year trying to make the airplane fly the pattern, and they haven't figured out whether it's them or if they've got the wrong setup in the radio, whether they need dual rates. It takes a long time to muddle through that.
Right.
So
Right.
that's my biggest effort, I think, is designing an airplane that's easy to manufacture and easy for the pilot to be competitive with it right out of the box. And Hu Yang does a very good job of that himself, but it's another couple $1,000.
Right.
So it's a difficult task having something built overseas and delivered to a customer here that he's happy with, and that's the biggest part of the design challenge, I think, today.
I can imagine. I hear a lot of pilots talking about a plane that lots of people are flying and saying, "I just can't make this thing fly right." They'll
Right.
sell it, and the next guy flies it, has set up, done a little setup to it. Now all of a sudden it flies great. I've seen that happen a few times.
Yeah.
When in this process of designing and stuff did you establish CKAero?
I think CKAero kind of merged into it. I've had a website selling a few things, but mostly it was just to share my enthusiasm for the hobby for a long time. Share my enthusiasm for trimming and setup, and to kind of show what was going on in the shop. Just really basic stuff. And uh, my wife, my previous wife, got sick and got cancer and lost her job as a result of it, and eventually passed away. But I went from doing this for many years for the being an enthusiast and because I love the sport. I had a bunch of kits on the market that I wasn't making any money on. I didn't want nothing to do with the retail side of it because I knew it would ruin my hobby part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, my wife lost her job and lost half of our household income. So I just kind of gathered it together, and that's kind of where Hebert Competition Designs came from. And I sold a few airplanes, and I started out with the Shinden and the Allure. We sold a lot of Allures.
Mm-hmm.
And years ago, around 2005, I met Brett Wickizer for the first time at our flying field, and realized the kid had immense talent. And we started I started working with him and helping him to be the best that he could be. And Brett was a competitor at heart from the first time I ever met him. And I think 4 short years later, he made the first U.S. team, which is an incredible, very uncommon, incredible feat. But a lot of it, I think, stemmed from the fact that he and I just thought the same way. We approached things the same way. We were both workaholics at the hobby and both just really enthusiastic about sharing our knowledge. You know, Brett enabled me to see, the market has changed and the hobby's changed. Brett grew up, they learned how to fly a trainer. His dad had the means to buy, when Brett expressed an interest in pattern, they went straight to Huyang, or back then it was Oxy, and purchased 2 airplanes. It made him instantly competitive due to the fact that he had machines they didn't have to build. However, there was a big gap in knowledge that comes from years and years of grinding it out of the field, practice, competing, and with my ability to help him come up to that standard quickly, we both realized that that's kind of where the hobby's going, and there's really, the guys with all the knowledge were quitting or moving on to different hobbies, and there was, if you wanted to fly pattern, there was nowhere to go. Even the NSRCA website that gave you any quality information on how to judge, how to set an airplane up, how to trim an airplane. So we kind of pooled our efforts there, and CKAero comes from that merger with Brett and I being successful and wanting to share our passion as a duo. What we kind of learned, what we like, what our tastes are. I have a certain path, I guess you would say, that Brett and I both stick to when it comes to the effort to flying and designing and what we believe an airplane should have. Of course, we both flew Glow, which was kind of unique. It's still unique today, and it's not common. Only the world champion and us and a few other guys around the world still fly Glow. So, Brett also wanted to give back and participate in the venture that I had going, because he has a certain set of skills that I don't have. I'm steady in the shop building and designing, and Brett is a really good writer and a good thinker, and he was able to put a really nice website together. With eventually we started with the help of Scott McCarg, who put my first website, CKAero, together. That's kind of where it started. Scott did a really good job, got me launched and got me off the ground, and did a lot of legwork for us. And Brett and I matured with our goals at that point. And Brett just started off and did the website himself, really. And we kind of honed in on what we're good at. And CKAero stands for Cajun, which is me and the kid. Brett came up with the name. Because when I met him, he was, I think, 15 years old. He was just a kid, and he would sit around and listen to us talk about trimming and just total awe, because he had heard anything. And he was a IMAC flyer, sport flyer. He did, all he did was hot dogging, and so when he came around to the pattern guys, he realized that we were really serious about this stuff, and he soaked that all in, and it made an impression on him. So eventually, Brett kind of became a son to me. He spent a lot of time at my house. We traveled the world together, went to 5 or 6 world championships. I've lost count. And he's really like my son. Very mature guy. Now he's a captain for Exojet. And I just watched him grow, and we've come close, and we just kind of share the same passion. So CKAero was basically the culmination of our thoughts and efforts, kind of packaging it in a website and being able to sell our products that we both make and manufacture and have a part of. And that's kind of where that came from. It was never something I intended to go out and do myself. I tried to avoid this side of the hobby, the retail side of the hobby. When I was in retail, I hated it, and I vowed never to do it again. And now here I am owning a retail business. But all my experiences has kind of led me up to the ability to do this kind of stuff, I guess.
Right, right. And you certainly have no shortage of energy in helping people. Every contest we go to, somebody's got warp stabs or something that you're working on for sure.
Yeah, I really enjoy enlightening people because what it does, it gives them a spark of enthusiasm. And, whenever you can help somebody, you can write something down all you want and somebody can read it and yeah, I see it. But to have somebody demonstrate and fix a problem and then you have an instant feel of that repair, it makes you a believer, and it gives you encouragement and enthusiasm for the hobby, and it kind of keeps you in the game. And I sometimes I share the story. I was used to play golf, not very good, but I played a lot. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the golf course and I get to the 18th hole and I can see my car out in the parking lot. And all I want to do is get in that car and go home. But I get on that last hole. It's been a miserable day. I've hit the waters and the bunkers, but finally on that 18th hole, I drive one right down the middle, and it instantly changes your mood. And you say, you know what? I think we probably got more time for about 9 more holes. And that's a shot of enthusiasm will do that for somebody when you can help them solve a problem. It takes that stress and that burden off of them, especially at a contest, because it is busy. You go to a contest and it's just you're thrashing out there. But I've done this for so long, and I know how to. I know how to measure and check an airplane very fast, and I can tell you within 10, 15 minutes what's wrong with your airplane. And I think it gives people encouragement to to look past their radio to solve problems, because most of the problems, I would say 99% of the problems, have nothing to do with the radio. It has to do with the airplane and your ability.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what my approach is. And I have a lot of customers out there with my airplanes, and I really enjoy. I'm very proud of the fact that I have airplanes on the market. I never had any goals to do that. It just kind of
Right.
happened, and I feel
Right.
I feel indebted to the customer in a way to give them the best experience with my product that I can. Really. So
Hmm.
I really look forward to going solving problems. It makes me happy to solve somebody's problem. As an automobile mechanic, I've been working on Volvos for 25 something years. When a car comes in the shop and the customer pays that bill, that problem better be fixed. So I solve
No
problems
doubt.
all day long, every day. It's kind of what I do, and it's a rewarding effort.
Hmm. Well, good. Well, let me ask you this: the difference in solving problems, because I know you and Brett go back and forth and fly biplanes here and there. Even though I hear a lot of people say, starting with the Allure and with the Alchemy, that you've almost designed away the need for biplanes in certain sequences and such. What are the main differences, and what additional problems do those biplanes bring to the table?
A biplane is kind of like a Formula One car. Um, you don't go buy groceries in a Formula One car. It takes a
Mhm.
special set of skills, really, to extract everything that biplane can give you. So, and it's not only in flying it; it's also in setting it up, in manufacturing it, making weight. There's so many specialty skills that you have to have, and it usually comes from years of being in a hobby. That's why you don't see anybody a novice flying, an Alchemy biplane. It's just not
Right.
feasible. Not to say that they can't. Uh, when I when I first started designing airplanes, I had a couple really bad designs. One of them was the Shark. Uh, we Nobody really knew anything. There's nowhere to go to find any information on how to build or design a biplane. So I stuck my neck out there and I used what I thought was the right amount of everything and put an airplane together that looked cool, and it turned out to be a terrible design. But it also enabled me to build from the faults of that design into kind of a philosophy on how a biplane should fly, how it should, how you should be able to compete with it, and who should be able to fly it. And in the end, really, a biplane, if it's set up correctly, flies no differently for the mundane task. If you're going to fly the master's program or the advanced program or even FAIP, it performs pretty much the same as a monoplane. Where the biplane excels is when you start throwing difficult tasks at it, like knife edge cornering, point rolls, the ability to show a snap in a maneuver. It's a little easier to see it with a biplane. There's more going on. There's more to visually to see for the judges. Um, so the hardest part about a biplane is making them uh, less expensive or the least expensive you can to where everybody can enjoy them. Because if you're spending $3,500 to $4,000 on the biplane, but it takes specialty equipment to make weight, nobody really wants to fool with that, you know. So, I think there's aviation in general, I think, has a romantic affair with biplanes because it's just there's something about two wings on an airplane that are just beautiful. You watch them in the air, it just has a romantic, old air age feel to it. And to be able to see one flying F-3A effortless by a very good pilot is really beautiful. But to get to that that level of performance, you have to have a bigger understanding and a bigger skill set on setting the airplane up to do that performance. And it's just like driving that F1 car.
Mm-hmm.
It'll take a nice corner at 120, but at 121, you're spun up against the wall. And a
Right.
biplane's kind of like that, You you can do the easy things really nice with it, and it'll do the hard things. But if it gets away from you, it's really hard to dial it back in and get it back in. So uh, if the airplane is set up absolutely perfectly, it flies no different from a monoplane. It just has more horsepower. Is the best way I can describe it. It has more abilities, and it likes to be abused if the abuser is capable. If the
Right.
abuser is abusive and he's not capable, it's worthless to you. It's worse than flying a poorly set up airplane. But the complications of a biplane is just way more moving parts. There's way more parts to manufacture. Now you have two wings to set perfectly instead of one. There's a lot more knowledge that needs to go in from the basic setup, for somebody to be successful with it. And
Mm-hmm.
what I did whenever I started designing the biplanes, my goal was to be able to sell with a good conscience a guy flying in the sportsman class one of my designs and not feel bad about it. And we've pretty much accomplished that now, and it's mostly come due to trimming. And all the fairy tales and stuff about monoplanes was one thing, but about biplanes was a whole nother level of nobody knew.
Right.
And for 10 years, I've been pursuing the biplane setup and really putting a lot of effort in that because I believe that's where F3A is going to be eventually going. Now, eventually, the information is all going to be common knowledge, and you'll be able to buy a biplane built and designed by anybody and have success with it. But I deal with manufacturers that still to this day have been in business 20 years and can't measure wings. And on a biplane, if you have the wings off just 2/10 of a degree, it's a miserable airplane to fly. It has to be right. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the I think the effort that we're putting in the biplanes now is kind of the ground floor of success for the next 5 or 10 years. And
Gotcha.
I think Brett and I have a good head start on biplane setup. And if we can get the manufacturers to catch up with our knowledge on setup and the fundamentals of designing the airplanes, we'll be a lot further down the road in 4 or 5 years.
Hmm. I see a couple of things with CK. I know you've moved locations and gotten set up again. What range of products do you have now that you're supplying to the industry?
We have a little bit of everything. Of course, I have my trimming tools, my trimming guides. We have airframes. Now I design and manufacture and sell my own line of propellers. I have 5 or 6, maybe 7 different propellers. I'm really proud of the fact that I'm making carbon fiber 3 blades and 2 blades for the glow planes. There's not a lot of market in glow anymore, but people have kind of let it die on the vine. And you had the choice between buying a 125, 140 gram APC propeller and nothing. And now I'm making
Hmm.
propellers they weigh 75 and 80 grams and outperform the other brands. So I have spinners and propellers. The normal. You can buy the Averrun Contra. You can buy the Precision
Hmm.
Aero single drive and the Averrun single drive from me. We sell. I make propellers specifically for those drives for the RPMs and the amp draws that everybody's looking for. Um, we're the YS importer for YS motors,
Hmm.
so any parts you need that YS produces, we stock. We try to stock them all. We're building our inventory more and more. We have a repair service now for the motors. So you have a YS motor that's acting crazy, or you can't get it to run, or it's spitting off props. We do the repair service here in house. Of course, we are a Hu Yang dealer, so we can get any airframe that he sells. And we sell a small variety of other battery trays that Jason Arnold's designed with some of it with my input, some of it with his own creativity. Jason was an early, um, I guess you would say, disciple to my trimming methods. Probably 10 years ago, and it's turned out to be a very close friendship between he and I. And now he imports CKAero's products over at his place, and I import stuff from his place here. And he has he's a good engineer, very creative, and he makes products that where there's a hole in the market for specialty things. He's able to
Hmm.
manufacture and make them. So we sell most of his products, whether they're battery trays, engine mounting setups, his drives, and a few other items that he sells. Um,
Okay.
that's pretty much it. I'm not a large retailer. I'm an enthusiast
Hmm.
uh, that that sells my ideas. Basically, if I come up with an idea on how to trim an airplane or set an airplane up, I make a tool for it. You buy that from me, or you can buy an airplane from me. We're fixing to be a JR dealer as well. We have retail rights to sell JR. Since Brett and I both just switched to JR from Futaba, I've been with Futaba for 30 years, and so we're gonna start stocking JR products and some radios, but it's going slowly. Eventually, I had to move to this location because I was out of room in my
Yeah.
my other house. I had a beautiful shop. I love my shop that I built, and but I'm just out of room to be able to store products. So my goal is to build a 30 by 50 shop, 2-story, with the ability to keep merchandise in an attic loft and have inventory, plus have an open shop space where people can come and visit. And I offer a full build service here. You can buy an airplane from me. I build it, and you come and pick it up, or I go through the trimming process with the airplane and perfect it before you pick it up. So I have a couple different levels you can buy it. and it doesn't matter who makes the airplane. If you have a BGA airplane you want somebody to build, I'll build that, or we'll build what we have in house as well. So that's another part of our services that we offer. And Brett's job is to fly well and keep the website up, and he does all the background stuff for the website. He's built an incredible website, making our invoices and keeping the paperwork straight. But my family's involved here. My daughters help with the inventory. My wife Almira does most of the pulling of the orders when they get sent over here, whether it's a motor or small parts, and gets it all packed up and ready to ship. So it's kind of a family-based operation that's centered around my passion and Brett's passion. And I don't really intend for it to be a large retail outlet. It's going to remain as much as possible a specialty. We want to sell things that we believe in, we manufacture, or we're proficient at. And I don't want to get off in the weeds and selling axles and all the small servo extensions and stuff like that. That if we needed to put it in an airplane to finish a build, we'll probably eventually carry all that stuff. But I'm not looking to open a hobby shop. This is basically centered around my passions and my philosophies on F3A and flying pattern in general.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of
very good. I know we've well, that's terrific. I know we've taken a lot of your time here. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that, and where can they find information on CKAero?
You can go to CKAero.net, which is our website, and send just an email to Bryan at CKAero.net, Brett at CKAero.net, or sales at CKAero.net. We have ysengines at CKAero.net. There's 4 or 5 different avenues to contact us. And we also have a phone number listed on the website. We try to do most of our business by not talking on the phone, because we still have a day job. And the best way to contact us is through email. And we do our best to get back with you. Sometimes we get tied up. Brett's flying a trip somewheres, and he's at 30,000 feet, and he's answering emails sometimes in the cabin while he's on autopilot. And sometimes I'm under the hood of a car changing the transmission, but we still try to get back to our customers.
Well, terrific. I'll put that information in the show notes so that everybody sees it. I really appreciate your time, Bryan. It's been interesting.
Yeah,
I still have about 50 questions, but I don't want to keep up too much more time. I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you out at the field soon.
Yeah, can't wait to get back out there. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. A very special thanks to my good friend John Gros, who wrote the song Deep in the Mud that is used as the show bumper music. Check him out on his website, www.johnpapagros.com. A link is in the show notes. See you at the next episode.